Imagine for a second that you are seated at a table right across from your partner,
Okay.
and they ask you, like really earnestly, to just open up.
Yeah.
To show your deepest fears, your insecurities, to basically drop the armor you've carried your entire life.
Right. A very vulnerable moment.
Exactly. But now, imagine that the very second you do that, the moment you finally expose that vulnerability, it is immediately cataloged, weaponized, and permanently held against you.
Wow. That is a pretty dark scenario.
It really is. But today, we are looking at a new text that claims this isn't just a scenario. It claims the modern cultural push for male vulnerability isn't actually about healing or intimacy at all.
Right.
It claims, rather controversially, that it is a highly coordinated, intentional trap.
Yeah. And we are going to get deep into the mechanics of how this alleged trap actually works.
We absolutely are. But really quick, before we get started, I want to ask you to make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a deep dive with us.
Yes, please do.
Because today's mission is centered around a truly explosive, highly debated ebook that has just been making waves everywhere online. It's titled Emotional Blackmail: How Women Control Modern Relationships, and it's by Connie Riker, published in 2024.
Yeah, and this book is, well, it's officially billed as a work of edutainment.
Right.
But reading it feels like parsing through a psychological thriller crossed with a radical manifesto.
Oh, completely. It's a text that attempts to shine this harsh, unrelenting spotlight into, the most hidden corners of gender dynamics and power struggles. Whether you agree with it or are completely shocked by it, it is a fascinating, incisive look into modern relationships. We really want to hook you into understanding this so you can decide if you want to buy it yourself.
Exactly. Our goal is to dissect it, to understand its architecture and see why it's provoking such an intense reaction. But before we go any further, I need to establish some really firm ground rules for you, the listener.
Yeah, that's crucial for this one.
Because the content we're going to unpack today is extremely politically and socially charged. I mean, it touches heavily on radical feminism, explicit female supremacy, anti-woke rhetoric, and a complete deconstruction of traditional gender roles.
It goes everywhere.
It really does. So let me make this explicitly clear. We're not taking any sides here.
Right. Zero sides.
We are not endorsing the viewpoints presented in Connie Riker's book, nor are we condemning them. Our mission today is to act purely as your impartial guides. We are treating this text as a sociological specimen, just reporting on and unpacking the ideas so you can understand the arguments being made.
Yeah, because the text makes these sweeping foundational claims about human nature. And our job is just to explore the how and why behind those claims without, adopting them as our own.
Precisely.
So let's unpack this. The most immediate hurdle in understanding those claims is actually just the physical structure of the book itself.
Oh, the structure is wild.
It's so jarring. The author presents this massive contradiction right on the very first page. It's a structural paradox that forces you to question what you are actually even reading.
Right, because you open the book to the preface and...
And the tone is indistinguishable from a men's rights survival guide.
Yes, exactly.
Language is crafted to resonate so deeply with male disenfranchisement. The author literally writes, "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of the lies, the double standards, the endless gaslighting that men are supposed to endure in silence."
Yeah, she characterizes modern relationships as a rigged game designed to keep men on their knees.
Right. It directly addresses a male reader, explicitly telling him that this book is his wake-up call, like his survival manual for reclaiming an identity that society is trying to erase.
And what's fascinating there is the linguistic choices. The author is utilizing the established vocabulary of male grievance
Completely.
by validating those specific frustrations, the feeling of navigating contradictory expectations. The preface establishes a deep sense of trust with a male reader. It acts as a hook.
It really does. The empathy for the male experience in this preface feels absolute.
It does.
But then, and this is the crazy part, you turn a single page,
Just one page.
just one page, you hit the introduction, and the entire narrative framework violently shifts into a radical female supremacist tone.
The empathy just vanishes.
Gone. Replaced by this triumphant, almost predatory voice. The opening line of the introduction is, "I've spent my life watching men fail. I've seen them stumble, fall, and break under the weight of their own inadequacies, and you know what? It's glorious."
It's such a drastic pivot.
And then she explicitly tells the male reader from the previous page to leave. The text reads, If you're a man, put it down. You're not ready for this truth. Go play video games or something. You'll only get hurt here.
Yeah, and it culminates in this rallying cry for women. Let's burn the patriarchy to the ground. The script is completely flipped in the span of 2 pages.
So how do we even process that? Like, what is the psychological intent behind that structural whiplash?
Well, we have to ask, is the author genuinely writing to men to wake them up to their systemic oppression? Or is this a tactical manual written for women to dominate men?
Right.
And if we look at the legal disclaimer, which classifies the text as edutainment and notes that any resemblance to real-world events is purely coincidental, it really suggests this dual narrative is a highly deliberate rhetorical device.
Oh, for sure. It's like reading a manual on how to rob a bank. But chapter 1 is written for the security guards to explain how compromised their perimeter is.
Yeah, exactly.
And chapter 2 is written for the thieves on how to bypass the alarms.
That's a great analogy. Because by starting with a preface that validates male grievances and following it immediately with an introduction that confirms their absolute worst fears of female manipulation, the book induces severe cognitive dissonance.
It really disorients the reader.
Exactly. It places them in a state of psychological instability. And the brilliance or, the manipulation of the structure is that it perfectly mirrors the very emotional manipulation that the rest of the book discusses.
Right. The text isn't just describing a phenomenon. It is actively inflicting that phenomenon on the reader.
Yes. It demands an active, almost defensive posture. Depending on which chapter you're reading, the foundational lie of society shifts entirely.
Right. From one perspective, the lie is that women are victims. From the other, the lie is that men possess any inherent strength to begin with.
Exactly. The text posits that women have mastered the art of keeping men off balance. And by keeping the reader off balance regarding the book's true audience, the author basically proves her own point.
It's wild. The text is written for a very specific target demographic. From what we can analyze, it seems to write for a female supremacist feminist audience are possessed by their negative animus allied with cultural Marxists attacking masculinity in Western civilization.
Yeah, that's exactly the ideological cocktail it seems to be aiming for in that introduction. It aggregates all those extreme theoretical viewpoints into one concentrated blast.
So let's trace how the book claims these tactics actually function in a day-to-day relationship. The core thesis, which the title Emotional Blackmail promises, centers entirely on the weaponization of vulnerability.
This is where we get into chapters 1, 4, and 17.
Right. The book posits a massive intentional contradiction in modern relationship dynamics. The claim is that women demand men be emotionally vulnerable. They request that men open up. But the text argues that the moment a man complies and shows fear or pain, that vulnerability is not met with support. It's instantly categorized as weakness.
Right, and the psychological concept the text uses to describe this is the double bind.
Okay, break that down for us. What exactly is a double bind in this context?
So a double bind isn't just a difficult choice, it's a communication dilemma where an individual receives 2 conflicting messages and obeying one automatically violates the other.
Damned if you do, damned if you do.
Exactly. But the crucial element of a true double bind is that the victim cannot step out of the situation or comment on the impossibility of the paradox without facing severe punishment.
Wow. Okay, so think about the mixed messages we see in modern media. The book uses this exact cultural confusion to argue that society has essentially set a psychological trap for men.
Yes. The author argues that women intentionally construct this specific psychological architecture to maintain leverage.
It's like, okay, imagine you are placed in the driver's seat of a car. You are handed a steering wheel, but the pedals have been completely removed.
Right. No control over the speed.
Exactly. You are instructed to drive safely, but the moment the car rolls down a hill and crashes, you are berated for your terrible driving. You're trapped.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. If the man in the relationship stays stoic and silent, refusing to steer, he's accused of being emotionally unavailable, cold, or exhibiting toxic masculinity.
Right.
But if he opens up and attempts to steer the emotional conversation, he crashes into the expectation of traditional masculine strength. The author literally writes, if a man cries, he's weak. If he doesn't, he's cold. If he expresses anger, he's toxic. If he stays silent, he's complicit.
And the text provides really granular, specific examples of how this is enforced.
Oh, absolutely. It details the day-to-day mechanics of guilt tripping, gaslighting, and what it specifically terms the weaponization of a single terror.
The single terror. That part was wild to read.
It is. The author approaches male psychology as something that is biologically hardwired to protect women in distress.
Right.
So, when the text claims a single tear is weaponized, it's arguing that female distress is utilized to trigger a primal protective instinct in the man, which is then immediately pivoted into a mechanism for submission.
Basically, the book argues that men are fundamentally fragile when faced with that specific emotional stimulus. A single tear bypasses male logic entirely.
Exactly. And sends the man spiraling into guilt. Furthermore, the book argues that women deliberately co opt the language of modern intimacy to mask these underlying power dynamics.
Oh, the co-opting of therapy language. That is a huge theme in the text. It highlights phrases like, if you loved me, you would, or you're not being supportive enough. And the author describes these not as genuine expressions of emotional need, but as emotional landmines.
Right. The argument is that these phrases are designed to put the man on the defensive. It forces him to constantly prove his devotion by yielding his own boundaries.
So the text asserts that the purpose of this communication isn't to foster genuine connection at all.
Not at all. It's to keep the man in a perpetual state of auditing his own behavior, ensuring he remains insecure and compliant.
Which begs the question, if we accept the premise of the text for a moment that this is an intentional trap, what is the alleged end goal?
That's the core question.
Right. If society is pushing for men's mental health awareness, the book frames this as society-wide bait. What is the payoff for sprinking the trap?
According to the framework established by the author, the end goal is absolute, uncontested superiority. Yeah. The text posits a historical rationale. It argues that because men historically controlled the levers of systemic and physical power, women were forced to master the shadows of emotional manipulation simply to survive.
Like an evolutionary adaptation to a patriarchal environment.
Exactly. However, the text argues that this dynamic has evolved far past mere survival. The book states, women don't want vulnerability, they want control. They want men to be strong enough to protect and provide, but weak enough to manipulate.
So they want a highly capable, subservient utility provider.
Yes. A man entirely stripped of his emotional autonomy and completely dependent on the woman for his sense of reality.
That brings us to how the text views institutions. Because the cynicism applied to traditional institutions like marriage is staggering.
It really is. The text states marriage is a sham, a relic of a patriarchal past, and yet women are the ones who benefit most from it.
It frames the entire concept of a partnership as almost a host-parasite relationship.
Right. It argues that women utilize the legal structure of marriage to extract physical and financial resources while deploying emotional blackmail to ensure the man never questions the arrangement.
And by framing it that way, the text attempts to systematically dismantle the broader societal pillars of masculinity. Let's look at chapters 1, 6, 7, and 15, where the book moves beyond interpersonal dynamics and attacks the macro concepts of male identity.
Yes, specifically targeting male rationality, the breadwinner role, and the historical narrative of male genius.
Let's start with rationality. There's this long-standing cultural stereotype that men operate on logic and women operate on emotion. The book directly confronts this.
It does. It acknowledges that male rationality has historically been weaponized to silence women's voices.
Right, dismissing legitimate grievances as hysterical. But the text doesn't argue for an equal balance of logic and emotion now.
No, not at all. It claims that in the modern era, women have completely inverted the hierarchy by using the concept of lived experience as an unassailable trump card.
Right, to override objective logic and facts. The author writes from this inverted perspective. My feelings are more valid than your facts because they come from lived experience, which trumps your education, logic, or evidence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanics of that argument are crucial. The author is arguing that the rules of engagement have fundamentally shifted. Objective truth is no longer recognized as the legitimate playing field.
The new playing field is emotional authority.
Exactly. By asserting that female emotional responses are inherently more authentic and valid than male logic, the text suggests women have successfully changed the terrain of the battle.
It's like, okay, it's the equivalent of showing up for a chess match, and your opponent declares that the game is actually poker, and they already hold a royal flush.
That's exactly it. It completely delegitimizes the man's method of processing the world.
And we see this exact same inversion technique applied when the book discusses the traditional role of the male provider.
Yes, the fallacy of the breadwinner.
The text claims that tying a man's intrinsic worth to his paycheck is a toxic patriarchal relic. But then, it immediately constructs another double bind.
Right. It claims that while women publicly advocate for egalitarian partnerships, They covertly maintain a strict demand for hypergamy.
Meaning they still secretly require men to be highly successful and out-earn them.
Yes, but the trap is that women actively resent the sacrifices that male success actually requires.
So a woman demands ambition from her partner. She requires him to build resources. But as that ambition yields those resources, the goalpost is intentionally shifted.
Exactly. The text states they demand ambitious partners, but they resent those partners for focusing on their work. The author frames this as a calculated hypocrisy.
Because if a woman leverages a man's financial resources, society views her as savvy. But if a man dedicates his time to building those resources, which she demanded, he is accused of being selfish and neglecting his emotional duties at home.
It is a paradigm where the man literally cannot succeed. His failure to provide makes him inadequate, but his success makes him emotionally unavailable.
It's just relentless. And the deconstruction doesn't stop there. The book scales this argument up to rewrite the entirety of human history.
Yes. The myth of male genius.
The author makes this staggering claim. Men didn't build civilization, they stole it.
Yeah, the book argues that virtually every famous male genius or innovator owes their success to the uncredited, suppressed labor of women.
It even claims the modern education system is entirely rigged to coddle boys while discouraging girls.
The author takes traditional pillars of male identity and flips them, arguing they're either completely fabricated or inherently toxic. She cites figures like Rosalind Franklin or Grace Hopper to argue a broader point, that male dominance in history is just superior public relations and brutal suppression.
Okay, I have to pause here.
Okay.
Because looking at this argument objectively, there is a massive logical knot in the source material.
It really is.
We have spent the last half hour discussing the book's claim that men are these incredibly fragile, easily manipulated emotional puppets who shatter at a single tear.
Right.
But then, the text turns around and credits these exact same fragile, incompetent men with the architectural genius to build and enforce a highly complex global patriarchy for millennia.
It's a massive paradox.
It's like claiming someone is an evil mastermind and an incompetent fool at the exact same time. How does the book possibly reconcile that?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the text attempts to thread this needle by suggesting that male systemic power is not a reflection of internal strength, but a fragile facade.
Maintained exclusively through brute physical force.
Yes, and the institutional suppression of female emotional intelligence. The argument is that men aren't actually strong, they simply built a rigid system to protect their inherent weakness.
So the patriarchy is just a suit of armor hiding a fragile core.
Exactly. And the text argues that when women realize they can bypass the systemic barriers by attacking the emotional fragility directly, the entire patriarchal structure just collapses from within.
Okay, so if the foundation of this dynamic relies on exerting emotional leverage over a man, how does the text suggest this leverage is practically maintained for decades?
The answer the book provides is isolation.
We're moving into Chapter 9 and Chapter 20 now. The attack on male friendship and success.
Yes. The text outlines how a man must be separated from any external reality testing. It attacks the concept of male friendship, claiming male bonds are shallow, transactional, and built on a foundation of competition.
And why are they shallow? Because the author claims women actively undermine those bonds to ensure they remain the center of a man's universe.
Right. The sociology here is wild. By labeling male bonding as toxic or exclusionary, the book claims men are stripped of their support networks.
The methodology is fascinating. It claims women weaponize sociological terminology to shame men out of their friendships.
Right, forcing the man into a defensive posture. He has to choose between defending his friends or appeasing his romantic partner.
And because he fears emotional withdrawal, he gradually distances himself from his friends.
Exactly. Which leaves him entirely dependent on his romantic partner for emotional validation and reality testing. He has no friends to tell him, "You aren't crazy, she is being unreasonable."
So what does this all mean for the listener?
Right.
I want to connect this directly to what you and I observe every day. We are constantly inundated with articles about the modern loneliness epidemic, right?
Oh, constantly, especially regarding adult men.
Right. We hear about hustle culture and how burnout is destroying mental health. What this book does is co-opt these real-world issues and frames them as the result of intentional gender-based manipulation.
It does. It utilizes specific case studies, like Mark, a CEO who has everything but feels empty inside, and Lisa, a stay-at-home mom who feels she's lost herself.
And it argues success is a rigged construct that leads to mental bankruptcy. But it blames this entirely on emotional blackmail.
Yes. It suggests Mark is driven into his hollow life by the relentless female demand for provision.
Okay, so we've seen the trap, the dismantling of history, the isolation. What is the end game? We're tackling chapter 21 in the epilogue now.
This is where it gets extreme. The source text explicitly states female supremacy is the endgame, and it's happening right in front of our eyes.
It frames wokeness not as a push for equality, but as a weapon.
Yes, a weapon used to silence dissent. The book says if he disagrees with a woman, he's labeled a misogynist. If he dares to question the narrative, he's canceled.
It's genuinely staggering.
This raises an important question about the text's portrayal of the future. The book claims that under female supremacy, there will be no wars, no environmental destruction.
And men will actually be happier.
That's the claim. It says men will live longer as followers, not leaders. But the price is that men must renounce everything that makes them men.
The book literally demands men amputate their souls.
Yes, it frames traditional masculinity as a disease to be eradicated.
It's as if the author is holding up a dark carnival mirror to society, reflecting the most polarized, radical anxieties of the internet age and saying, this isn't a fear, this is the plan.
It forces any reader to confront the absolute logical extremes of current gender discourse.
Which brings us to our final thought. If we live in a world where intimacy is viewed purely through the lens of power dynamics, leverage, and blackmail, what happens to the concept of genuine love?
That's the real tragedy here. Can any relationship survive if both parties are constantly treating each other as political adversaries in a zero-sum game?
Exactly. Where is the space for uncalculated human connection?
If the price of this proposed societal peace is the amputation of the soul, is it a utopia or just a highly managed prison?
Man, that is something for all of you to chew on. That brings our deep dive to a close. Whether you view this book as a profound wake-up call, a satirical warning, or an outrageous manifesto, it is undeniably a text that sparks intense debate.
It really does.
If you want to read this and see the evidence, the double binds, and the wild contradictions for yourself, you have to check it out. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now to buy the ebook Emotional Blackmail: How Women Control Modern Relationships.
It's definitely a wild read.
And if you want more of this content, you need to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.